Hello and welcome to another episode of the First Time Founders podcast, the show where we talk about how to take a business from nothing and grow it into something meaningful. Today we're speaking to Steve Phillips. Steve's really well known in the UK hospitality sector as a leading operator, a guy that founder or corporate operators bring in to help them scale up operations from a handful of sites into national or regional chains. Steve started his career as a chef and he's worked his way all the way through the ranks, so he understands really intimately how to do site selection, how to package product, i.e. food and drink offerings, to make money and delight customers, how to recruit and retain people, how to implement systems. There's almost nothing that Steve doesn't know about how you can mess up a restaurant operation as a first-time founder in that sector. Now, I'm sure many people watching or listening are going to be like me and love the idea of owning their local restaurant or bar. So in this episode, I had some fun putting some concepts to Steve and seeing if he could help me guarantee success when I do take over my local place to provide beer and pizza to the masses. He almost talked me out of it. Like any good industry veteran, he knows just how easy it is to go wrong as a first timer wading into what might seem like a glamorous sector. So if you're tempted to do the same, make sure you listen to this episode. And for God's sake, reach out to Steve before you put your life savings into whatever it is you're thinking of starting. Enjoy the episode. Steve, welcome to the First Time Founders podcast. Thank you for doing this.
No worries. Glad to be here. Good to catch up.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And we've only been doing this podcast for a while, but most of the people that have been coming on are either B2B software founders or purchasers from founders. Quite a few people in hospitality, and of course, as we'll get onto, that's your background. But this is a special appearance because you're here to talk about something a little different. You're both a founder yourself now, which we can get into. Yeah. But actually, we're going to talk about what it's like to be a hospitality founder, and in particular, where hospitality founders go wrong. So before we dive into that, would you mind telling people a bit about sort of who you are, where you come from, and how you've ended up doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, great. So I'm Steve Phillips, to people that know me well. As you get older, you start using your long name, right? It's a bit weird. And hospitality my whole life, really. So 30 odd years. Very typical hospitality story. I remember sitting in school looking at the work experience. In those days, it was a Rolodex, right? You had to sort of go through and pick what card you were going to do. So random. And I just remember thinking, don't want to be behind a desk. And there was this cooking thing in a hotel. I was like, well, that sounds like a bit more fun. So yeah, from that part-time job, then a full-time job. One of the things as a non-uni attending person, I love to tell is that it's a bit Jeremy Clarkson, I'm afraid, but I left, did my last GCSE exam, went home, packed my bags, moved into the staff quarters of that hotel that day, and went full time the next day. And thankfully, touch wood, I've never been out of work since. So I've just always stayed in hospitality, carried on as a chef. Went to Café Rouge in the really early days when it was owner-operated, the original Pelican Group, Karen Jones, etc., and opened their Hertford branch as a chef. Transition front of house there. Again, we'll probably come on to it, but met some amazing people that gave me amazing opportunities. Still friends today. This is the late 90s now, early 2000s, and went into Frankie and Benny's again in its sort of heyday. I think I joined at sort of site 70, opened the branch in Stevenage, which was one of their first sovereign restaurants at the time, and went on to be a big success for them. The restaurant was fantastic and was a real sort of example of what Frankie and Benny's was back in the day, before it went very different, let's say. I did 8 years there, and that's where I transitioned from a manager to an area manager and a sort of senior area manager and that kind of thing. And I went to GBK in the time where the Nando's guys had just brought it. So again, very people-focused business, great founders. They were doing a sort of semi-turnaround job at that point. Did a startup with Levi Roots and his business partner, which was very exciting. but very, very challenging and very different, but gave me a lot of backbone. And as his founder partner used to say, gave me a rhino skin that I probably didn't quite have by then. Then we went to Basaba, which by that point was a 20-year-old business and very much a local Thai Alan Yao business that had sort of really lost its way. Tried many times to get outside London and expand, and it was in a bit of a mess. So that was a bit of a turnaround job with a new exec team, and then on to Marugami. Toradol Capdesia partnership and Toradol are the brand owners that have got sort of over 800 Marigamis across the world, a sort of 1,500 sized estate of other brands as well, and stock exchange listed in Japan. So big PLC that decided to come to London and launch their very famous and very admired brand from Japan. I've been doing that for the last 3 years. Right up until this very point where I'm about 9-10 days officially away from becoming, some people are saying, crossing to the dark side and becoming a consultant. Like the world needs more of us, right?
a founder consultant. So this is your first business, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, as usual, a couple of things that gave me a bit of a backbone of income to make the leap are happening, and what I didn't want to do, it's a bit typical of me, I suppose, but I didn't want to just set up a generic email, become a consultant, and see what happens. I thought if I'm going to do it, I'll do it relatively properly, and we'll start it as if it could be a hopefully, relatively decent sized sort of practice one day, maybe. So using people that, to collab with at the moment that I know from the industry and see how that pans out.
And what sort of services will you be delivering through the new vehicle, Steve? The reason I ask is obviously for the rest of this conversation, I'm going to get into shamelessly extracting pro bono consulting advice from you for my benefit and then for the benefit of those listening in. So what sort of things will you be advising clients on in the new business?
Well, I think, look, my bread and butter is obviously operations. But I think where I'm relatively uniquely placed as an operator is that I really understand food. I mean, obviously operators do, but I understand it on a foodie level. I understand it on a, I wouldn't say molecular. I wasn't that kind of chef, but I understand it on a process based level, and I sort of get flavor profiles and I can put together a dish still myself, that kind of thing. So I was chef trained, hospitality trained. So I think the food side of things, menu creation, flavor profile, product. I've been called a product guy by bosses in the past. I think is a big thing for me. But then the other unique elements, I guess, or relatively unique, is that in the opportunities I've had, I've worked on quite a lot of hospitality technology. I'm definitely not a technology brain, but I kind of know how I want something to work and things to talk to each other. So I do a lot in that sort of hospitality tech stack space, and I've sort of built that, with some very clever people, much cleverer than me in Marugami and in some other businesses. And then your bread and butter, people, operations, SOPs, labour, cost of sales, so on and so forth. But then I think I worked with some great people over the years, so I've definitely got some collaboration with some training partners, with some marketing partners, commercial partners, finance partners, etc. So I'd like to think with my network I can bring the whole shop to somebody, and I think in particular I really got a passion for owner operators, people trying to find their way, using my sort of 30 odd years of experience to save themselves a whole load of pain and energy and effort and time. Just tap it. It's that, I'm seeing it already. It's that classic consultant thing. Okay, our day rate is reflects our experience and what we've done, but boy, can we cut a lot of time and pain away from what you might have to go through. You just can't. It's hard to bottle that experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, time and pain, they're inherent to the founder journey, as a lot of these new operators will find out. Okay,
Yeah.
Steve. So, like all good software guys that have had at least their first exit of whatever size, I obviously desperately want to be a restaurateur. So, for the
This is where I talk you out of it, right?
yeah, do your best. So, right, I want to open a beer and pizza joint, my hometown Brentwood in Essex on the east side of London. Um, let's talk through all the things I'm going to cock up as a non-hospitality, non-food, non-restaurant guy. I think I understand operations because I've delivered software to operators for the last 10 years, but I know I don't actually understand operations. But just for the benefit of our audience, humor me. Can we go through and sort of, as we were preparing for this call, we talked about some of the areas where you specialize, and you've mentioned some of them in the setup to this, product, financials, location, all that kind of stuff. Can we talk through like an illustrative concept and basically just tease out where people get it right and get it very, very wrong, and kind of around this sort of idea? If someone, and let's say I'm going to open mine in Brentwood, but maybe someone listening wanting to open theirs in Manchester or somewhere else, what's the
Yeah.
first thing they'd need to think about? What's the first irrecoverable mistake people make when they wander into hospitality and try and set up a business?
Oh, I do have first of all, would I open a pizza beer place in Brentwood? I'm not talking about Brentwood, by the way, but probably not because it's just it's stacked against you, right?
Talk,
I
expand on that, Steve, because you're probably
yeah.
right. That's why I'm having some fun with it.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I as in the average Joe, not necessarily, myself would if I was given the opportunity. But I think there's that saying of if you've got a bucket of cash to open a restaurant, why don't you put it in a bin, set fire to it for a while, stamp on it, and see how much you got left. You might have more, right? You might get a better return. But look, I think the first thing is experience, and it goes back in the day. When I was sort of coming up through the ranks, I worked for a few owner operators of pubs, um, and they that was the thing then, right? Bankers made some money and opened a pub,
Yeah.
and it was a big thing, and maybe pubs were a bit more available, I think, probably at the time than they are now, but no experience. I mean, it's just it. So going back to the point of everything stacked against you, if you then go into that with no experience because you think your experience is as a customer, um, I mean, when you just put that down on paper, it's the craziest statement ever, right? Why
So
would you do it?
let's unpack that then. So let's say that I persuaded you to be my co-founder. We're well financed, and I say, Steve, I know that I don't have the skills to do this myself. Come in, you know, you can have the equity because I'm going to set fire to my money if I do it without you. Okay, so now you're like, all right, Rob, fine. You pay for the whole thing. We're going to own it equally. You might even be the majority owner. So now we've solved the experience point. What's the next thing you're thinking about when you're thinking, Rob, I'm not going to let you drag me down?
Yeah, I mean, site selection. Forget even at this point the brand or the idea or the concept, right? Because invariably, average brands will do better in great sites, and it takes a really, really good concept to do well in a poor site. So for me, site selection, and now that doesn't necessarily mean, prime high street next to Starbucks, but it's got to suit the business and it's got to suit the economics of the business. I think that's the other thing that people get wrong. They sort of take the site and then start working the rest of the economics backwards.
That's so. In this example, you might say to me, Rob, I don't give a shit that you live in Brentwood. We're not starting a restaurant in Brentwood just because it's convenient for you.
Yeah, yeah, but also if it was Brentwood, does it is I know Brentwood a little bit, but is it on the high street or is it tucked down one of the side roads, or is it on the approach road from the M25 rather than right in the middle of town, that kind of thing? I think you got to suss all that out. But what I mean about the economics is that if you've got a really low margin product, which of course if you did pizza you probably would be in the better side of that, then to a degree, you've got a bit more to play with in terms of how prime you can go. If you're doing high protein, a steak restaurant, if you're then going to go and pay for prime high street location, then you're they probably just don't stack.
Can, can you
Just
can you
work.
give a worked example of that, Steve? Because I know that you thought you toyed with taking a site for a coffee concept, didn't you? Do you want to talk people through how you thought about that property and whether the economics stacked up?
Yeah, it was opportunistic, really. So it's near where I live, and there's I live in Bow in East London. There's a lot of building going on. It's right on the very edge of the Olympic, uh, whatever they call it, the follow up
Yeah, it's like the regeneration zone, right?
regeneration project, whatever, I can't remember what they call it, legacy something or other. So it's just getting out to the edge of Bow, which is a weird place. Bromley by Bow is a weird place. It's sort of 15 minutes from nowhere, but very close to everywhere. Being in zone 2, but I can't get a coffee. I mean, first world problems. I get it, but I have to walk across to McDonald's, which is very close, or go to the Costa machine in the Tesco's. You can't get a coffee. So they've just whacked up a load of apartments, and they're all most of the apartments going up are built by not for profit organisations. So there's a Guinness pension foundation that's just whacked up a big estate. So therefore, they're not institutional landlords. They don't understand how to play that game. And what made sense, though, was that this potential coffee shop, was on the way to the tube. I walked past it every day. I could do I sat there one day for most of the day, did some work on my laptop outside, sitting on a bench, and just people counted, and just very
Really?
quickly worked out that you only need to sell 70, 80, 90 cups of coffee in the morning commute, and about 50 cups of coffee in a sort of longer stretched out coming home time, to make it work, assuming all the other economics were in place. So assuming that I was going to get handed a shell that I could use, and so on and so forth. And I knew what the cost of sales would be on it, and I knew roughly what the labour would be on it, of course. So I knew what the rent needed to be by working it back like that. As it turns out, because of the story I told you about the landlord, effectively that site was just not going to be useful for anybody, because it just wasn't finished correctly. It didn't have the right electricity, didn't have the right gas, didn't have the right HVAC, didn't have the right heating, fire suppression, etc., etc. It was just crazy. So basically, it was 200, 250, 300 grand in before you got to building it. And actually, I know that they had an offer on it before from an independent. Now, if I wasn't experienced and I didn't have people I could draw on to help me kind of come to that conclusion, I hate to think that somebody could potentially sign that lease because the rent looked great, right? And then realize they got 300 grand's worth of just getting it to a standard that they can even fit it out.
Does that happen often? Because I like to think that wouldn't happen to me, because I'd have the brains to call someone like you and say, please take some of my money to stop me losing more. But I'm assuming that's partly because I'm a second time founder and I've made so many mistakes that it's knocked at least some of the cockiness out of me. I guess people that haven't had that experience could easily wade in and sign a lease, right? As the first thing they do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they absolutely could, and I
That's
think
so
there's
bad.
obviously, I mean, not definitely not talking about all of them, right? But there's definitely also some, not fantastic contractors out there that might might kind of not do their homework, and once that lease is signed and you're in and you're discovering problems, that's game over, right? That's you're in a mess to start with. So look, it's back to experience. I've obviously been exposed to property stuff, but I was able to pick the phone up to a very useful chap and say, look, can you do me a favour here? And of course, it's very, very nice to actually do me a favour as well. So that sort of hour and a half that he spent on it, on a couple of calls and a few emails for me, stopped me making an enormous mistake.
That's unbelievable. Okay, so we know site selection is critical, and site selection is what drives your sort of opportunity through your footfall, and then depending on what your product is, that informs the margin profile. That makes sense. So generally, would you advise someone to have a concept in mind and then go and look for a property for it? Or as a first time hospitality founder, does it make more sense to find a site and then think about what the right concept is for that site and if the economics pencil, or is there no right answer?
I don't think there is a right answer actually, but because I think people are definitely successful doing it both ways. Personally, I think is the best way I could answer it is that, you know, as an operator over the years, you end up just having 100 ideas right in your head, of things that you think you could do. So I think, you know, if I ever went down that road, I would probably be looking for a site, and then something would trigger, and you know that idea you've always had for that would work there. I mean, the coffee shop, for example, you know, I'd never thought really of a coffee shop, but as soon as I saw that, it was just, you know, it was a coffee shop, and then you know, my take on it really was that it could have been a bit sort of Vietnamese biased,
Yeah.
a bit of an Asian twist. Therefore, you can do something a bit more exciting with the simple food offer, and you know, rather than just crusty sandwiches and whatnot. So it sort of evolved in my head after I saw the site. Whereas, you know, I think I don't know what it is about us, right? But I think we all love a sports bar, as crap as they normally are.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've got this kind of sports bar idea. I probably had it since I was 17. So, you know, again, the right site, you know, might drive that.
What would the right site have to be like for a sports bar to be less crap than normal?
I don't know. 28 years in, I haven't found it, so I think it's probably not out there.
Uh,
I don't know. I mean, it's obviously a lot naff about a sports bar, but at the same time, there's I think we all pine for a really good one, right? We're really good.
well, all the pubs have turned into restaurants, haven't they? It does feel like there's a bit of a void, like just consumer side. You know, you want to go for a pint. Yeah, there's not really that many choices. So many of these
Yeah,
pubs now are turned into restaurants to try and open your wallet a bit wider. It makes sense as to why they have to do that, but it does leave a bit of a gap in your sort of social opportunities.
yeah. No, I think so. No, I mean, again, I think a site like that is always going to need to be high footfall. It's, you know, it's going to need to be where there's lots of people. Clearly, you know. I mean, actually, in a way, I think, you know, London's doomed for something like that. It's just all too expensive. But I think other cities, UK and certainly abroad, can make that work. And we're also still quite biased here, right? We're sports fans in the UK, but and I'm not, by the way. I'm terrible at every sport, and I don't really watch very much of it. So
Not
uh,
competitive eating. I bet you could throw down a hot dog or two.
yeah, well, yeah, I definitely have been known to do that. Um, so yeah, I think if you can go somewhere where there is so many sports where people are into that, you don't have to just rely on football, because I think football puts a lot of people off, right? For example, but yeah, when you can really get that into that again, is that actually more Europe? I was in Riga recently, and it was when Riga were playing the Ice Hockey World Cup against Canada. It was electric, you know, absolutely mental. But then, as soon as the match ended, a football game come on, and you know, as soon as that ended, this was all in a big square screen in the square. Something else came on, from a different part of the country and a different time zone, and everyone stayed. If it was, you know,
Oh, that's
the
so interesting.
football, yeah, you know, you talk about football in a park in the UK, the game's over, everyone runs off, right? Grabs a
Uh,
kebab, goes home.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. And I guess America, of course, they have, what is it, like their big five sports or whatever. And so when you think about the American sports bar, and anyone that's traveled across the Atlantic and likes a drink, it's an experience many of us enjoy. I hadn't actually thought about the fact that they'll switch from baseball to basketball to NFL, ice hockey. Sometimes those things are playing simultaneously on those crazy sort of
Yeah,
multi-screen experiences. I hadn't thought
yeah,
about the fact that in the UK you might have a bit of cricket and the football.
bit of
It's
rugby
just not.
maybe.
It's not the
Yeah,
same, is it?
yeah, and also those games, right? Their days out in the States. You know, I've been to a baseball game there, and you know, you start looking at the watch going, when's this over?
See, it's interesting, isn't it? Because even as you talk about that, you're sort of flitting between operator and customer persona. It's so easy, isn't it, as a potential founder to overlook what the likely customer journey is actually going to be, and realistically, how many customers are there that match the thing that you've idealized in your head. Should we get on to that? Probably brings us on to product then, doesn't it? When I say product in hospitality or founding a hospitality business, like what does that encompass for you? Is that mainly about the food offer?
For me, yes, because it's again weird in hospitality is that we're you whack in there bars, drink, food, hotels, accommodation, but we all move in very different circles, right? We kind of give the same experiences and sort of understand each other's language. I liken it to in Asia, lots of countries will speak very different dialects, right? As I'm sure most people are aware. But so you might go to I know the Philippines well, so you might go to the Philippines and the main language actually is Tagalog and then English. But there's so many dialects there, right? So where they won't understand each other, tens if not hundreds, and I think it's the same in hospitality. We just don't, bar people don't understand food people don't understand hotel people. You sort of come from the same place, but you don't get it. So I think that's the first thing, and for me, it's definitely food when it comes to product. And I've stuck by a really simple rule in my mind, and that's that if you as a customer feel that you can go home and put together that dish you've just eaten in I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour, no problem at all. You're not daunted by it, where to start. You're not wondering where you might get the ingredients. And you feel like you've got enough skill to pull it off. I think as a restaurant, you've just served a dish that you should not be serving.
That's interesting. That's quite punchy, but it makes sense. Do you want to unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, I call it a come back and get me dish, right? You got to want to go back to that place because one, it's moreish. You want more of it. You want to go back. But two, you don't even know how to begin to replicate it, right? So I think that's the thing, and I think over the years, take certain pasta brands for example, in the sort of mid 2000s, some nice ravioli with a really tasty sauce, a bit of grated parmesan, and some fried sage. That was a bit like, whoa, what is this? It's not spag bowl, it's not carbonara with cream. It's something different, right? So, but these pasta guys kind of got caught out, I think, by the supermarkets, producing fresh pasta, producing little tubs of fresh sauce. Actually, I can just air fry my sage, and I can make this look very nice. And actually, thanks to people like Jamie Oliver and whatnot, I can even give it a crack with, he's shown me how easy it is just to roll a bit of fresh pasta and make it myself if I want to do it for my friends. So I think these guys got caught out by that. Why would you go to said pasta brand, pay £14-15 for a bowl of pasta, which you can do? Okay, it's a bit more than Monday night dinner, but you can do it. And I think there's lots of brands, sadly, some of which I've worked for, that have not realised that, and they've just lost their way, right? And
I hadn't thought about that, but it's true actually. Even though I'm not much of a cook, I like to eat, and I consequently shop quite a lot. And it's true, as I walk down the aisles, even if I don't buy the items, it's building a level of familiarity with things that used to be sort of the preserve of restaurants. And you're right, it's harder and harder to push me into a place of novelty and excitement as I roll my eyes down the menu, even if I don't pick those items. I would imagine that's the same for most of the general public that would make up a customer base.
Yeah, and it's great, right? It's absolutely fantastic when you think about it, because UK is a culinary hellhole, was a culinary hellhole, right? It was terrible. We couldn't cook, and we didn't have much identity to our food, and so on and so forth. And actually, my opinion is that a consequence is we still don't really have a lot of identity to our food. But what we've done is very typical UK thing and very typical hospitality thing, which I'm very also passionate about, is we've just embraced all these other different cultures and potentially done some of this food better, right? I mean, there's definitely trains of thought that you go to somewhere like Dishoom and you're getting Bombay cafe style Indian food as good as you would get in Bombay, if not better. Pizza Pilgrims I love as a pizza. You get a Neapolitan pizza as good as you might get in Naples, if not better. So I believe that UK, especially London, is fantastic at drawing that identity out. Now they've had to do that because we're being so well educated over the years, and the supermarkets are pushing us, and so on and so forth. So again, brands can't be lazy, or restaurant concepts can't be lazy. You can't offer something that you can easily replicate, or everyone's doing, or it's not to a good standard. So, and look, it can't be every menu on the item. Everyone could probably deep fry some chicken wings and put some nice sauce on it, and it'll be decent. But take the chicken wing brands. They're spending hours, tumbling, marinating, ensuring that these wings are kind of soaked and left in the best possible condition, double frying, etc. Doing all the stuff you probably wouldn't bother doing, just to eke out the 10-15% improvement to what you might get at home. So again, you start going, I've got to go back to X wing shop and get this amazing buffalo wing. Whereas we could go to Tesco's, get some wings, slap them in a fryer, put some Frank's hot sauce over it. You're 60-70% of the way there, but it's not enough, right?
That's so true. Okay, so you've talked me out of Rob's Beer and Pizza in Brentwood. I'll focus on software and services. Well played. Imagine that I was an experienced chef. Do you have to talk those men and women off the ledge sometimes, and almost being too creative and assuming the customer has a level of discernment that they don't have and aren't willing to pay for? I'm assuming it's just as dangerous, maybe not just as dangerous, but pretty dangerous going too far the other way, isn't it?
Yeah.
That sounded like that was a tone of resignation in your voice.
It's so complicated, I think, actually. That chefs, I was very much, I'd call myself, I'd split them into two types, creatives and productions. Now that sounds unfair on production chefs, and I put myself in that camp to start, 100% put myself in that camp. Be a joke to think of anything other than that. But what I mean by that is that these are process guys that get food, get flavor, but absolutely know how to do it at bulk, on speed, and make money. Right? I think that's the big thing. Get a good GP, get an amazing product that can be replicated, can be done fast, and will still make good margin.
Sorry, so good GP, so good gross profit, right? Like, don't be cooking
profit.
Things where there's not enough profit to cover the operating costs of the restaurant.
Exactly. And then you have the creatives, and these guys are incredible, right? But they are artists, and they are artists in the sense of every other artist cliche that you can think of. They're temperamental, they're passionate about what they're doing, they don't think business first, and so on and so forth. But of course, they produce the most amazing plate of food that you've ever seen. And I think it's really rare and well publicized, of course, that it's rare that you get people with even with a decent balance of those skill sets. And I don't quite know what is the balance. Maybe it's actually a bit more. Maybe it's 55% creative, is 45% production is perfect. But I think that's the key to it. So again, whenever I think about anything that I might do, two people jump to mind. One is very creative, and one of the best chefs I've ever worked with, known. I'm not talking at Michelin level or anything like that. I'm talking at just coming up with. I had a concept, and he needed to put some dishes together for me. Incredible. And the other, excuse me, the other is Mr. excuse me. Well, the other one is Mr. Process, right? He's just he'll suss out, right, if we replace that with that will get our margin in line and it will be just as good. If we cook it like this and not like that, we'll do it faster, and so on and so forth.
Could they work together, do you think? Could you build a founding team with those two individuals in upper management or ownership, or do you think they'd kill each other?
They can with somebody looking after them. Yeah, for sure. But you couldn't put them in a room and say, see you later. I'll be back in an hour.
That's interesting. Okay, so let's imagine you CEO of a new casual dining concept. You're looking to scale up. You've decided you've got these kind of two brilliant, different but complementary food product leaders. What are the other key roles you need to build around that, or the key areas of competence? I guess finance people? I mean, is finance sort of driven? You've sort of covered finance in a way, I suppose, haven't you? Is it people next?
Yeah, look, I mean, just staying on finance for a minute, I think the job that operators and the food people and probably everyone else does is so intense that if you've not got somebody counting the numbers and coming back and keeping you in line, I think that's a bit that it can be finished before it's started. So I think that is important. Now, whether that's just a great outsourced accountant or whether that's a proper outsourced or in-house CFO or whatever else, it depends what size you're going for, right? But clearly, you right size it to the business, but I think that's enormous. And
that is key.
I've,
and there are some good fractional finance directors, CFOs, aren't there, hovering around the restaurant sector? I know a few.
And companies and services, etc. So, and I've seen that on both sides of the coin, I'd say. Really, really tightly managed, and therefore, ultimately successful, and maybe not so quite tightly managed, and then actually the operators love it for a while, but then as soon as someone wakes up, all hell breaks loose, right? And then you have to start making decisions that you really didn't want to make or shouldn't have made in the first place. So I think that is an absolute key role, especially with what we talked about right at the start of this, is that you're really talking about such small margins. So, pay someone to make sure that at least happens. So I think that's key. Look, assuming that you've got the menu and you've got somebody that is doing the food and drink side of things. I'm going to say operator. I think we're the master of all trades. The jack of all trades, and by nature of the role. So most operators can do a bit of people. They can do a little bit of marketing. They can do certainly. Do the service stuff. They can write SOPs and things like that. So I think the operator tends to be a key role. And again, I would say that if you're doing a startup and the operator doesn't want to do that stuff, you've got the wrong operator.
Massive red flag, right? Like if they wanted to delegate everything.
Big time, and unfortunately, that's where operator consultants, naturally come in, right? But I think that's the point. Is that even if I went to a business and they didn't have that person and they wanted me to consult, but that person wasn't there to do it, I couldn't work with that business, right? Be impossible. So I think that's key. And then depends. I think the next role then depends on really what you're going for. If you're going to scale, and that's always the plan, and that's how you're funded, then for me, a HR stroke people person. And when I say HR, I don't mean a policy person, because you can buy policies, right? You can print them off the internet. You don't need that to get going. I mean, someone's going to drive your culture, and really look after people and keep everyone in check, because again at the start you're making really tough decisions and you're under loads of pressure. If you can do that within a framework of what values you've agreed you're going out to achieve in the first place, you just need that culture person on your shoulder saying, yeah but is that in line? Does that match what we're doing?
What are some examples of, I mean, on a no-name basis, but Can you do any examples pop to mind of where you've seen a business veer off course because of the absence of that cultural check?
Not from the start, to be honest. I would say. I mean, look,
Because the operator tends to have a handle on that, right? They intuitively know what the culture's supposed to be, and they're strong-willed enough to sort of impose it on a small group.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I've done two things from the start, which which I can talk about. Marugami from the start, and it was super important to us. I did a lot of the culture stuff from day one in terms of owning it, but we as a team, and with Keith, our CEO, we did. It was always a really important thing. In fact, it was one of the reasons that without even getting into what the business was and who they were, that I went to work for him. I knew Keith, I knew his values, I knew what he'd be going for, and sure enough, we sat down and we had that as a core thing. So we did it really, really well. And as soon as we knew that we had a bit of business on our hands, we brought in a head of people, and she's carried that on. And I could talk about Levi's because it doesn't exist anymore. But in that business, especially with a sort of relatively well-known figurehead, we didn't do an awful lot of people culture talking. We did lots more business talking, which was mainly coming from his business partner. And when times got tough, we certainly focused on margin and not on people. And ultimately, I don't think it was. You could describe the culture there. I don't think you could say what it was, what it stood for.
How does that manifest in terms of sort of negative business impact? Is it you just end up with inconsistent customer experience?
Yeah. I mean, look, there was a whole host of stuff going on there, and two business partners that had different ideas what the business should be in the first place. But yeah, ultimately, I think that came down to no one knew what they was working for. I think that's the key. And obviously, a lot of people felt they were working for this sort of public figure that they recognised and knew. And actually, that probably helped because that at least that was something people could, what they say, tie your flag to, right? Whereas in Marugami, the cause, the direction, the idea, the thing we were going after was always really clear, and people joined for that. And that also sifts out some people. Why would you want to do that? For some people, I used to say in interviews, look, if you just want to come in, do your job, go home, it's probably not for you. And I say that with caution because what I don't want to do is I don't want to sound like that typical old school operator that says, if you don't want to work 70 hours a week, then this is not for
Right.
you. That's not what I mean by that. That is quite toxic culture that we've unfortunately had in our industry for a while. But what I do mean is that I'm going to tell you to do something one way, and then the next day I'm going to tell you to do it another way, and then the next day I'm going to tell you to do it another way, because I'm sussing this out with you. If you go and work for said other established 50-odd site brand, they're not going to do. They'll be lucky if they tell you to do two different things in a year. So your life there is going to be far easier than your life here. But this is going to be really exciting, and we're going to be on a roller coaster. That's for some people, it's not for others, right?
What type of people did that tend to appeal to? Like, why did it appeal to them? Because I think a lot of people listening know that they need to hire for cultural fit, but don't really know what that feels like. And particularly if you're trying to start a hospitality business where you don't really have the lever of pay.
No, we don't. Do you know what? I think it just weeds out people that aren't really passionate about hospitality, because actually
Right.
everything I've just said is what hospitality stands for and what makes it special. So if you've got negative feelings towards those kind of things that we stand for, and okay, it's accelerated in a startup, then I think we've all met them, right? You're in hospitality, but you should probably be working in a bank.
Yes.
So that's that, and that it's definitely no slight on the person. Of course, it's not. But hospitality is so accessible and so easy to get into. I think some people get into it when they shouldn't, and then it's so I don't want to use the word trap, stickable, that it's hard to get out of as well. So actually, I think we retain people that we shouldn't necessarily be retaining a lot of the time.
I think that's right. Like, it's quite easy to sort of hide as the average, just below par employee, right? And you can
Yeah.
over time collect a ton of those
Yeah.
people. I guess where you've got what feels like a recruitment crisis, you can understand why brands are settling for people that shouldn't
For
really
sure.
be there. So does that mean that one of the key drivers of sort of success for a hospitality operator is finding some sort of unique and reliable talent acquisition
Yeah, look, and
mechanism?
it's luck as well, right? Because when you first start, where are you in the supply and demand curve? When we started Marugami, we were very much in the supply curve, right? We had jobs. It was the middle of COVID. There was loads of managers out of work. We were always going to get have a good opportunity. I didn't need to use agents to start with, right? But what it did enable us to do, which I think is probably once in a lifetime, is run the recruitment process I've always wanted to run. First of all, myself and Keith sat down, and this is where he always had great vision and understanding as well. And we kind of said, look, we think we're going to do, we're funded to do 25 sites before we get on to more funding or franchising. We don't know how this first site's going to go. We've definitely got a bunch of other sites lined up. Why don't we hire the first 8 general managers straight away? And the reason for that is, most CEOs would go, what? But what we got to is, well, look, one's a general manager and they're on 100% of their salary, and the second person is a senior deputy manager and they're on 95% of that salary. So it's only costing us 5%. And the next 3 are assistant managers and they're on 70%. So they're only costing us 30% each. And then you go all the way down to, and then there's a bunch of people who just need to be supervisors and they may be 60%. So actually the true cost isn't 7 extra managers. It's the 7 extra people that are going to go and do 45 hours work a week in a restaurant. So they're not costing you, their 100% wages. But at the same time, you've got great people or very high level people. And if you do go for a fast rollout, you can very quickly say, right, as we did, open site 2, 4 there, open site 3, 3, and 3. And so on and so forth, and that's exactly what we did. So that enabled us to do this great process, which I love that because it was really drawn out, but it was fantastic. Everyone had to do video applications, and again, a recruiter would say in a recruiting market, you're just going to put people off. Yep, you're absolutely right. You are going to put people off, but anyone that's willing to do it's probably the people that I want. So we made them do video applications, and I sat there in my bedroom in the middle of COVID reviewing hundreds. We had 8 roles, and I had hundreds of managers applying. Again, unheard of, and that turned into stage 2. I can't remember exactly, but stage 2, they had to submit some kind of food plan. I think it was some sort of what they think about hospitality food and so on and so forth. Stage 3, they had to do a cooking video. So they had to cook their best dish, live, not live in terms of in front of us, but they had to film it. There's criteria around how fast it needed to be and so on and so forth. And there was some amazing stuff in that. One guy that we hired, dressed up as Karate Kid, Japanese business, right? Had his mum in the video as his sous chef. It was brilliant, right?
That's amazing.
And there was loads of people that were polished hospitality professionals. Some people I knew, and of course, people are going to be awkward in front of everyone. I'm not particularly comfortable in front of a camera, but they didn't have the passion to take it to the extra stage. They didn't have the extra drive to kind of go, well, what if I did this or what if I did that? And some of the people we hired, I mean, they won't thank me. They will thank. They know I'll talk about it. So take the mickey out of them. But I mean, they produced a plate of trash, right? But they did it in such a good, fun way. It's just great. And then we made them, and we were now by this stage, we were in semi-open. If you remember the early years of, you probably won't, but I'll bring it back to the early years of 2021 was when it was really, really cold for like a week, snowing, super icy. And sort of January, February, we were getting ready to sort of the final stage, and we whittled them down to 15 or 20 or something like that. We split them into 3 groups, and we made them work with each other. So that was another test in there. They were all applying for the same 8 roles, but we had 20 people that had to work as teams, to help each other out. They couldn't throw each other under the bus, or if they did, it was clearly going to stand out as a problem. And we made them do food tours. So we made them construct a food tour to bring me and Keith, the CEO, around London on this food tour, which then turned out to be eat out only. So then they had the extra complication of doing an eat out only food tour because of COVID in London. So we're walking around like a dead borough market, telling the police that we're out for essential food, and all that sort of stuff. But they had to construct it, they had to put a story behind it, they had to work with each other, they had to physically take us on the tour as if they were a tour company. And from that, we hired 8.
That's unbelievable. You know what's interesting? I started my career as a corporate lawyer where they put crazy resources into finding the right kids. I mean, they made a mistake with me because I qualified and then promptly left because I should have been in sales and entrepreneurship from the beginning. I was a lousy lawyer, but we did a lot of group exercises to see how you performed in that situation with your rivals. And then interestingly, I did a terrible job of originally kind of recruiting and managing for Yapster because it was an 8-year journey and I'd never run anything before. So for the first 4 years, I was terrible. For the next 2, I was average. And then finally for the last 2, I think I was okay because it was forced on me by COVID. And we had a multi-stage process, exactly like you've just described, with like tests for candidates, because it turns out that what people say they like to do and are going to do is not in any way representative of how they'll behave when they turn up for a role, as you well know. And it's just really interesting that I've never heard a hospitality leader, operator really talk about implementing a truly rigorous talent process as you would have to in professional services or technology, where literally all of the value in the business is the code that the people write and the product that they build. I know you're self-aware enough to know that obviously it's a slightly different recruitment market post-COVID, but people have got to try and find a way to imitate that, haven't they? I mean, that probably after site selection is what it comes down to. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like it.
Yeah, for sure. It's just close.
Site selection and product. Sorry, yeah. I mean, you said product, right? Site selection, product.
Yeah,
and then maintaining it is about not filling your business with people that don't give a shit.
100%. And like I say, it was once in a lifetime that I was able to do that.
Wow.
Look back.
You can't unsee that though, can you? Now you've seen it. It must be almost painful to not implement it again.
Yeah, look, I think the trick is you've always got to strive for that. You've got to give yourself enough time. Again, go back to the pizza and beer joint in Brentwood. If you're going to hire that general manager,
let's finish by really making sure I don't do it.
that I'm talking myself out of my equity here. that general manager that you hire. I mean, look, in Brentwood, to hire a decent general manager, you're probably in the sort of high 30s, mid 40s per year, right? Salary. Now that with everything else you're putting into that business is a relatively small amount of money, right? But yet another classic mistake is, right, 8 weeks to go, let's hire the manager. And then we've got to open on time because we start burning rent. Well, what if you don't get the right manager? Well, we'll go with him. He'll be all right. What? Like, that is just crazy, right? That's the person that's going to look after your 1.5 million investment. Like, what? So for three and a half, $4,000 a week, go early, get the right person, get them involved with everything, make them feel that they're also giving birth to this business, right? You get them involved with it. Okay, of course they're not going to be as productive as they will be once they're up and running. Of course, it'll be a bit of an easy life to start with, but that's an investment. That's like an enormous investment, right? Just don't try and trigger it at just the right time where they're going to definitely work their full week or whatever. It's just mental. Pay it up front, get it done, get the right person.
Steve, this has been so fun, so useful. I'll put your email and your LinkedIn in the show notes. I know you've got a full crop of starting customers for now, clients for now. Are you happy for people to reach out to you if they've enjoyed what you've read?
Of course, always. Yeah, I mean, look, it's good just to chat to people, right? It's good to know what's going on, and a conversation always leads to another conversation, and so on and so forth. So always good.
So aspiring hospitality founders, if you want to be talked out of losing your life savings, then Steve is your man. And if you decide to still go with it after that, he's still your man. Steve, thank you so much. This has been amazing.
No worries. No, great. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.